Once upon a city morning, amidst the hustle of tall buildings and the endless buzz of traffic, there was a young journalist named Evelyn. Curious, fearless, and always chasing the truth. She loved stories that shook people to their core. That morning, she arrived at her office, coffee in hand, only to find her editor already waiting, a stern look on his face. On his desk lay piles of newspapers, but in the middle, one file stood out. He didn't waste a moment. "Evelyn," he said, voice sharp but calm, "I need a story. Something that keeps readers awake at night. Something chilling. Something real." Evelyn blinked. "Sir, but where would I even find that?" The editor slid the file toward her. On it, bold letters read, "Hollow Creek, the Forgotten Town." Evelyn flipped through the pages. Fog-shrouded pictures of a lake, faded newspaper clippings, and reports of mysterious disappearances. One name kept appearing again and again. Hollow Lake. Evelyn's heart quickened. This place, this story, it could be exactly what she was looking for. Without hesitation, she picked up the file and made up her mind. If the truth hides somewhere in Hollow Creek, I'm gonna find it. And with that resolve, she began a journey that would become the most terrifying story of her life. The sun was dipping low when Evelyn's car rolled past the crooked wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Hollow Creek. Population 1,204. The numbers looked freshly painted, but beneath them, the old paint was peeling, as though the population had been scratched out and rewritten too many times to count. She slowed down, scanning the quiet streets. The town looked asleep, not the soft, gentle kind of sleep. Number. This was the heavy, suffocating silence of a place that didn't want to wake. On her left, a row of shops stood in shadows. Broken glass glittered on sidewalks. A Diener's neon sign buzzed weakly, half the letters gone, leaving it to spell D_NE_. Across the road, an old church leaned sideways, its bell tower cracked, a cross dangling dangerously against the evening sky. As Evelyn's tires hummed on the uneven asphalt, she caught the first signs of life. A group of townsfolk clustered near the corner store. They stopped talking as her car approached. Every head turned, every eye followed. Their stares weren't curious. They weren't even cautious. They were something colder, like the gaze of people who knew what was coming and pitied anyone who didn't. Evelyn's hands tightened on the wheel. She was used to stares. Being a journalist meant walking into places where she didn't belong. But here, something was different. These people weren't sizing her up. They were warning her without a single word. Still, she pressed on, her editor's voice echoed in her head. Find the truth about Hollow Lake. Dig into the whispers. Bring me a story that'll keep our readers awake at night. And Hollow Creek, she thought, was the closest she'd ever come to stepping into one of her own headlines. The town gave no welcome. No laughter drifted out from houses. No children's bikes leaned against fences. Curtains twitched when her car passed by, only to snap shut, as though afraid to let her in. Abandoned houses lined the outskirts, their roofs sagging under years of rot. Rusted mailboxes leaned at odd angles, some stuffed with letters so old they had fused into one thick block of paper. Evelyn exhaled slowly. She felt the story already. A town smothered by something it refused to name. And at the center of it all, waiting like a black heart, was Hollow Lake. She drove toward the edge of town where the only motel stood, its neon sign buzzing faintly against the coming night. Lakeside Inn. Lakeside, The word made her uneasy, but it was the only option. As she pulled into the gravel lot, her car tires crunched loudly in the silence. She killed the engine, and for the first time, she noticed there was no sound, no wind, no insects, no rustling of trees, just silence, thick and absolute. It pressed against her eardrums like cotton stuffed into her skull. Shaking it off, Evelyn leaned back in her seat and reached for the radio. A habit, a way to push back the unnatural quiet. A cheerful tune crackled to life, filling the car with some country station out of town. She let out a small breath. Normal, ordinary. Then, the music cut in half, dissolving into a jagged hiss. Evelyn frowned, tapping the dial. "Not now," she muttered. "Come on." The static deepened, warping into a low hum that vibrated through the car like a heartbeat, and then beneath the noise, she heard it. A voice. Soft, breathless, right against her ear. It said one word. "Evelyn!" She froze. Her pulse kicked like a trapped bird in her chest. The radio still hissed, but the voice was gone. Number. Not gone. Waiting. She swallowed hard and twisted the dial off. The silence rushed back in, heavier now, heavier than before. Her own reflection stared at her from the dark windshield, pale, wide-eyed, the kind of face you only see on someone who's just realized they are not alone. Evelyn forced herself to breathe, forced herself to open the door and step out into the night air. The gravel crunched again beneath her boots. But this time, it sounded too loud, too exposed. The motel loomed in front of her like a tired old sentinel, its flickering neon lights sputtering against the encroaching fog. She squared her shoulders. She came here for answers, for truth, for a story that would shake the world outside of Hollow Creek. But even as she walked toward the office door, one thought clawed its way into her mind and refused to let go. How had the radio known her name? Evelyn sat in her car for a long moment, staring at the flickering neon sign of the Lakeside Inn, trying to steady her racing heart. The whisper from the radio still echoed faintly in her mind. Evelyn. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her bag and stepped onto the gravel parking lot. Each step crunched sharply in the silence, the sound unnervingly loud in the oppressive quiet of Hollow Creek. The motel itself looked tired, its paint peeling, a few loose boards rattling in the light evening wind. But it was her only option. Pushing open the squeaky door, she was met with a faint smell of mildew and dust. The lobby was dimly lit, half empty, with an old bell on the counter that hadn't been polished in decades. Behind the counter sat the innkeeper, a man whose skin was weathered, his hair gray and wiry, his eyes sharp beneath bushy brows. He didn't smile as she approached. "Good evening," Evelyn said, trying to sound casual. "I have a reservation." The man's eyes flicked over her, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. "Name," he grunted. "Evelyn Carter," she replied. He scribbled in a thick ledger, the sound of the pen scratching against the paper loud in the silence. Finally, he looked up. "Room 12, he said, pushing a brass key across the counter. Evelyn took it, but as she did, he added quietly, almost as if muttering to himself, Don't go near the lake after sundown." She froze. "Excuse me?" The innkeeper didn't meet her eyes. "People, they don't go there, not after the sun sets. Fog comes down," voices whisper. "Best to stay away." Evelyn tilted her head, curiosity piqued. "Voices?" He shook his head. "I said enough," You'll learn soon enough if you have to. Something about the way he spoke sent a shiver down her spine. His words were simple, yet layered with a caution she could feel pressing against her like the fog rolling off the lake outside. She sensed he was hiding something, a truth he didn't dare put into words. She nodded politely, not wanting to press him further, and made her way up the narrow staircase. Each step groaned under her weight, echoing through the empty halls. The wallpaper was faded, curling at the edges, and the carpet was threadbare, revealing patches of cold, cracked wood underneath. Room 12 was small, with one bed, a cracked nightstand, and a window that overlooked the fog-shrouded lake in the distance. Evelyn set her bag down and went to the small dresser, unpacking her notebook and camera. Every shadow in the room seemed to stretch unnaturally in the dim light, playing tricks on her eyes. She tried to focus on her assignment: Hollow Lake, the town's forgotten curse, the whispers in the fog. But the weight of the innkeeper's words lingered. Don't go near the lake after sundown. It repeated in her mind like a warning from some unseen presence. As the darkness settled outside, the fog thickened, curling around the edges of the motel and drifting across the empty parking lot. Evelyn closed the window, but the heavy scent of damp earth and water lingered. She tried to shake off the unease, telling herself it was just a quiet town, just a story waiting to be discovered. But Hollow Creek had its own plans. Around midnight, as Evelyn was jotting notes from the journal she had found at the lake, she heard it, the softest scrape against the wood outside her door. She froze. Another sound followed. Slow, deliberate footsteps. They circled the room in the hallway. Her pulse quickened. "Hello?" she called, her voice almost swallowed by the thick fog pressing against the walls. No reply. She held her breath, listening. The footsteps stopped abruptly. She strained her ears, but there was nothing. Not a creak, not a shuffle, not even the whisper of wind. Yet, she knew someone, or something, had been there. Evelyn reached for the small flashlight on the nightstand, the beam trembling slightly in her hand. She edged to the door, slowly turning the knob, ready to confront whoever it was. The hallway remained empty, silence, thick and suffocating, pressed in from every direction. The air felt colder, heavier. Her breath fogged in the dim beam of her light, and for a moment, she could have sworn she saw a shadow move just beyond the doorframe. Too fast to be real, too deliberate to be coincidence. Her fingers tightened around the flashlight. She took a step back. Something about Hollow Creek was alive in a way she hadn't expected, watching her, waiting, whispering. And deep down, Evelyn knew the lake wasn't the only secret this town was hiding. Evelyn's pulse raced. The hallway outside her door was empty, yet the weight of those unseen footsteps pressed against her chest like a hand she couldn't shake. She clutched the flashlight tighter and backed away from the door, every instinct screaming that she wasn't alone. The fog outside thickened, curling around the edges of the motel like some living thing. Her breath came in shallow bursts, fogging the beam of light in her hand. After several tense moments, she forced herself to calm down. It was just nerves, just the creaks of an old building, she told herself. But deep down, she knew Hollow Creek wasn't ordinary, and Hollow Lake was more than just a forgotten body of water. Morning came slowly, gray and heavy. The fog lingered even as the sun began to rise, cloaking the town in a damp, ghostly light. Evelyn packed her bag, leaving the safety of the motel room behind. She had come here to uncover a story, and if the town or the lake wanted to keep its secrets, it would have to confront her. The streets of Hollow Creek were still quiet. Broken shutters rattled in the light wind. A lone cat slinked across the sidewalk, pausing to watch her with glowing eyes before vanishing into the mist. Evelyn walked briskly, notebook and camera ready, following the directions she had found scribbled in the old diary she'd uncovered yesterday. A diary that hinted at rituals, disappearances, and voices that came with the fog. The trail out of town led her to a narrow, overgrown path that twisted through the trees. The closer she got to the lake, the heavier the air became. Damp earth, rotting leaves, and the faint smell of stagnant water clung to everything. The silence was absolute, broken only by her own footsteps and the occasional distant bird call that sounded out of place, too sharp in the thick fog. Evelyn's heart thumped, but curiosity pushed her forward. Every instinct told her to turn back, yet every journalist's instinct told her to continue. This was a story no one else dared touch, and she couldn't walk away now. Halfway down the trail, she noticed a wooden sign nailed crookedly to a tree. "Keep out. Danger. Ahead." The letters were faded red, and the board swayed gently in the wind, creaking like a whisper. Evelyn's stomach tightened. She stopped, reading the warning several times. It didn't deter her. If anything, it made her more determined. Stories like this were never discovered by playing it safe. As she pressed on, the fog seemed to thicken unnaturally. The path narrowed, trees crowding close on both sides. She could barely see her own hands in front of her, and the muffled sound of the forest seemed to warp and echo, as though it were listening. Suddenly, a sound drifted through the mist, faint at first, almost imperceptible. A voice? She froze, her ears strained. It could have been the wind, but the cadence, it sounded like soft chanting, a low, rhythmical hum that pulsed with the fog itself. Evelyn's heart raced. "Who is there?" she whispered to herself. No answer, just the fog, curling around her, thickening with every step. Then, through the haze, she caught sight of the lake. Dark, still and silent, it lay like a black mirror, reflecting the gray sky above. Its surface was unnaturally calm. No ripples, no movement, yet a sense of anticipation vibrated through the air. The diary had described Hollow Lake like this, deceptively peaceful, hiding horrors beneath its surface. She stepped closer to the edge. The air turned colder, damp clinging to her skin. The fog swirled around her ankles. Evelyn shivered, but she couldn't pull away. Something about the lake was calling her, whispering to her. Even though the wind carried no sound she could hear. Her flashlight flickered once, then died. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Darkness wrapped around her like a thick blanket, heavier than the fog, colder than the morning air. She fumbled for her notebook, gripping it like a lifeline, her eyes scanning the black water for any movement. A ripple spread across the surface. Just one, small, almost deliberate. Evelyn leaned closer, heart hammering in her chest. The diary had warned of voices of hands rising from the water. And in that moment, she felt that warning was more than superstition. Something stirred beneath the surface. A shadow moved just below the dark water, lingering near the edge. Evelyn's pulse surged. She took a cautious step back, only for the ground beneath her foot to squelch in mud, as though the lake itself were alive, shifting in anticipation. A faint whisper cut through the fog. Not the wind this time. Her name. Evelyn! She froze, remembering the radio, the footsteps, the innkeeper's warning. Hollow Lake was watching. Hollow Creek was alive. And whatever waited in the fog was closer than she realized. Evelyn's breath came in shallow bursts as she stepped back from the edge of Hollow Lake. The water had gone still again, but the unease lingered, pressing against her like the thick morning fog. She gripped her flashlight, trembling, though she knew the battery was likely dead. Her eyes caught something half buried in the mud at the water's edge. A small, leather-bound object, darkened with age and water stains. Curious, she bent down and pulled it free. Mud crumbled from the cover to reveal a worn title she could barely make out. Hollow Creek, a diary. Evelyn's heart quickened. This had to be connected to the stories she had read in the newspaper clippings and the editor's file. She wiped it off as best she could and opened it. The pages were fragile, yellowed with age. Ink had run in some places, but most of the words were still legible. The handwriting was delicate, almost childlike, belonging to a girl from a century ago. The first entry read, "The fog comes early tonight. Mother says the lake is restless. It whispers. It listens. Father says we must never go near it after dark. But I hear the water calling. I hear it calling our names." Evelyn shivered, a chill crawling up her spine. Every word resonated with the feelings she'd experienced since arriving. The fog, the whispers, the sense that the lake was alive and watching. She flipped through the next entries. They spoke of strange rituals by the lake, disappearances in the night, townsfolk who vanished without a trace. There were sketches, crude and frantic, of figures rising from the water and eyes peering from the fog. The final entry on one page made her stomach tighten, and then the lake opened. The words seemed to echo in her mind. The ripple she had seen earlier, the whisper calling her name. It wasn't just her imagination. Something beneath the surface of Hollow Lake was real. A sudden rustle from the nearby trees made her spin around. Nothing moved, save for the branches swaying gently in the fog. She swallowed hard, reminding herself that fear could be deceptive. Yet every instinct in her body screamed that she was being watched. Evelyn sat down carefully on a damp patch of grass, opening the diary fully. Each page pulled her deeper into the life of the girl who had written it. And with every line, Evelyn felt the lake's power growing heavier, almost tangible. The diary spoke of shadows that rose from the water, of voices that whispered secrets too terrible to be spoken aloud. Evelyn traced the inked words with her finger, the surface damp and smeared, and shivered as a breeze rose from the lake, carrying with it a faint, almost musical murmur. She closed the diary quickly, heart pounding. The ripple on the lake's surface had returned. She thought she saw something move. A dark shape just beneath the water, gliding slowly toward the edge. Evelyn stood, clutching the diary as if it were a shield. The fog thickened suddenly, curling around her legs and swallowing the ground beneath her feet. The whispers returned, soft at first, then growing louder, overlapping, indistinct. Yet she could make out the faintest hint of a word. Her name. Evelyn. Evelyn. Her pulse surged. She knew she had crossed a threshold. The lake was no longer just a story. It was a presence, and it had acknowledged her. Every instinct screamed to run, to get back to the motel, to anything safe. But a part of her, the journalist in her, the one chasing truth, was rooted to the spot. The diary had connected her to this place. Hollow Creek had secrets, and she was beginning to understand that uncovering them might cost more than she had ever imagined. A sudden splash made her jump. The water rippled violently near the shore, though there had been no wind, no falling branch, no stone thrown. The lake seemed alive. And in the mist, Evelyn could swear she saw a pale hand rise slowly from the dark water, fingers reaching upward as though beckoning her closer. Evelyn stumbled back, clutching the diary to her chest, her mind racing. The fog swallowed everything around her. The lake had spoken, and she had listened. She turned to run, but the path back to the trail seemed distorted, unfamiliar. Shadows shifted in the mist, and the whispering grew louder, urgent, almost pleading. Evelyn realized she was no longer simply observing the story. She was part of it. Evelyn's heart raced as she stumbled backward from the water's edge, clutching the diary like a talisman. The pale hand she had glimpsed beneath the dark surface of Hollow Lake lingered in her mind, a silent, terrifying promise that she was not alone. The fog had grown denser, curling around her legs, swallowing the ground and muting all sound, except the distant lapping of water against the shore. The air was thick with moisture, clinging to her skin, chilling her to the bone. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet the path back to the trail seemed distant, distorted in the shifting mist. Shadows stretched and twisted along the water, dancing just beyond the limits of her vision. Each movement felt deliberate, purposeful, as if the lake itself were alive and watching her struggle. A whisper broke the silence, soft, breathless, unmistakable. "Evelyn!" She spun around, but the fog swallowed everything. The trees, the path, even the lake seemed to shift and warp in the thick gray haze. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing pulse. It was as if the very air held its breath. Evelyn's flashlight flickered weakly in her grip, a brief beam slicing through the gray emptiness. Nothing moved. Nothing, except for the lake. Its surface had become darker, almost black, reflecting nothing of the sky above. Then a ripple formed, one deliberate, slow, as if the water itself were breathing. Her stomach clenched. The diary's words returned to her. And then the lake opened. What had seemed like a fragment of a child's imagination now felt disturbingly real. Evelyn stepped closer, compelled by a mixture of fear and curiosity. The fog swirled around her ankles like tendrils, tugging at her, urging her forward. She could hear faint voices layered beneath the sound of the water, soft whispers overlapping, calling her name, echoing through the mist. "Evelyn, Evelyn, come closer." She shivered violently and took a step back. The ground beneath her foot was wet and slippery. A sudden splash erupted near the lake's edge, though there was no visible cause. The water shimmered unnaturally, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw the outline of a figure beneath the surface. Tall, dark, and silent, rising just below the ripples. The diary, held tight to her chest, seemed suddenly warm, almost vibrating with energy. Evelyn realized the connection was deeper than she had imagined. The lake wasn't just a place. It was a presence, a force, something ancient, patient, and aware of her. A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a faint, eerie melody. Evelyn froze. The sound wasn't music. It was voices, soft at first, then urgent, layered with whispers she couldn't fully comprehend. The fog twisted around her, thickening with each step she took, suffocating, claustrophobic, alive. She felt it then. A tug, gentle at first, at her sleeve, as though invisible hands were reaching for her. She stumbled backward, nearly dropping the diary, heart hammering in her chest. The fog seemed to respond, swirling faster, pressing in tighter, wrapping the world in gray, hiding everything she had taken for granted. The path, the trees, even the lake itself. And then the water moved again. Slowly, deliberately, a pale hand broke the surface, fingers reaching upward, curling and stretching like a living thing. Evelyn's breath caught. She could feel the pull of the lake, a magnetic force that seemed to tug at her very soul. Her mind raced, heart pounding louder than the whispers that surrounded her. She wanted to run, yet something rooted her to the spot. A primal curiosity, the journalist in her, screamed to uncover the truth, even as her instincts screamed to flee. The ripple grew into small waves, and then, for a brief moment, Evelyn could see multiple figures beneath the water. Shadows, dark and indistinct, twisting just beneath the surface, waiting, watching. Their presence was undeniable, alive, aware, ancient. Evelyn's hands shook as she clutched the diary to her chest. She knew she had crossed a boundary. Hollow Lake had marked her. The fog was no longer just mist. It was alive, conscious, pressing its weight against her chest, whispering, demanding. A final ripple spread across the lake. The water's surface shimmered unnaturally, reflecting nothing but gray. And in that instant, Evelyn realized she had a choice. Step back and risk running blindly into the fog, or move forward and confront whatever lay beneath the surface. The whispers rose, overlapping into a single, urgent cry. "Evelyn! Come!" Her pulse surged. Fear, fascination, and inevitability collided. Evelyn took a hesitant step closer to the water. And then, the scene faded to darkness, the fog swallowing everything, leaving only the echo of her name. Haunting. Insistent. Evelyn's breath came in short, ragged bursts. The fog was thicker than ever, curling around her like living fingers, hiding everything beyond the lake's edge. The pale hands she had glimpsed beneath the water before now floated higher, rising deliberately as if the lake itself were reaching for her. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the pull, magnetic, almost supernatural, rooted her in place. Her fingers tightened around the diary. She could feel the energy of it pulsing through her hands, almost as if it were warning her or urging her forward. Another ripple spread across the black water. Shadows shifted beneath the surface, too dark, too deliberate to be reflections. And then, as if aware of her fear, the fog whispered again. "Evelyn!" The voice was no longer distant. It was close, brushing her ear like a soft caress, chilling her to the bone. She spun around and saw nothing. Just fog. Just the lake, black and still, waiting. Her flashlight, long dead, cast no relief. Only darkness, stretching endlessly, swallowing everything familiar. The whisper grew louder, more urgent, almost pleading. "Evelyn, come." She stumbled backward, tripping on the muddy ground. The diary slipped from her hands and landed face down in the mud. She scrambled to retrieve it, heart hammering. And then, movement. Something rose from the lake. Slowly, deliberately. Pale, wet, fingers curling, reaching, beckoning. Its form was distorted by the water and fog, yet unmistakably human. And yet, not human. The air grew colder, heavier, pressing against her chest. Evelyn's mind raced. Was this a trick of her imagination? A hallucination born from exhaustion and fear? The diary had warned of shadows, whispers, disappearances, and now she understood they were real. A soft splash sounded beside her. She froze. Another hand, smaller this time, broke the water. Ripples danced outward, unnaturally fast. A faint shimmer ran across the surface, reflecting shapes that moved independently of the water. The whispers merged, layering over each other, calling her name in a chorus of despair and longing. Evelyn, Evelyn, come. She staggered backward, chest tight, and realized something horrifying. The fog, the lake, the whispers. They were aware, watching, waiting. The diary had been her guide, but now it was a tether, pulling her into something she couldn't yet understand. Another step, another ripple, and suddenly the pale hand reached fully out of the water. Fingers elongated unnaturally, curving toward her. Evelyn's scream caught in her throat as instinct finally overrode curiosity. She stumbled, slipping on the mud, falling to her knees. For a moment, the world was suspended. Fog thick as wool, lake black and endless, hands emerging from the water, whispers circling her like a predator's breath. Evelyn's chest heaved. She wanted to move, to run, to escape, but her legs wouldn't obey. The diary lay inches from her hand. Trembling, she reached for it, and the whispers intensified, almost as if urging her to choose, to confront, or flee. She didn't dare look back, didn't dare blink. The fog seemed alive, shifting and curling closer with every heartbeat. Then just as her fingers closed around the diary, the water's surface shivered violently. A chorus of whispers erupted into a scream that seemed to echo through the fog, vibrating in her very bones. Evelyn's scream joined it. She tried to pull away, but the fog pressed in tighter, the lake pulling her closer, the whispers consuming every thought. And then, darkness, silence. Only the faint echo of her name lingered in the air. Evelyn. The fog swallowed the lake, the diary, and Evelyn herself. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Only the memory of the whispers lingered, haunting the mist.